esa posición de fuerza.
After decades of tension, the United States and Cuba are finally on the path to reconciliation. Last month, Barack Obama and Raul Castro announced the beginning of the process of normalizing relations between their two nations. A long-awaited diplomatic step which began last week as American and Cuban officials kicked off historic talks in Havana. Cuba has been subject to an American embargo since 1960. The regulation makes it illegal for U.S. corporations to do business with Cuba, which deprives the island of a long list of American goods, including Coca-Cola and better internet access. As part of the newly announced rapprochement, Cuba is expecting to see an influx of American tourists already this year. That is, of course, if the two countries can work through 60 years of mistrust. Our focus this week is on Cuba. Hello and welcome to our focus on Cuba, the country which began historic discussions on restoring diplomatic relations with the United States. Decades of hostility now seem likely to come to an end by removing economic sanctions and opening embassies. And we have an expert on the relations between these two countries, Dr. Lillian Mansour, Associate Professor at the University of Miami, who's here to talk to us about the implications. Hi, hello, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So how is lifting the American embargo going to influence Cuba both politically and financially? Will it have a positive effect or a negative one?
No, I mean, lifting the embargo is going to have overall a positive effect on Cuba for a number of reasons. I mean, first of all, of course, it would, it potentially could help the economy, clearly. But I think most importantly, it will give the Cuban people a sense that, a future is possible. And two, they will no longer have an excuse of saying, oh, we're like this and our situation is like this because of the embargo. So they'll have to take matters in their own hands.
Now, the Cuban regime is very well known that is a tyrannical regime, an oppressive one, which limits the freedoms of its citizens. By restoring these ties, these diplomatic relations, isn't the U.S. legitimizing this regime, maybe prolonging its existence by providing it more financial resources now?
Let's see. I mean, the Cuban regime is tyrannical in some ways, but it certainly is less tyrannical than many of the countries with whom the U.S. have diplomatic relations, with whom the U.S., that they have close allies. The question of freedom of speech, of, persecution of dissidents, but, it's not totally the way in which it's oftentimes presented, by the media especially in the U.S.
How are the Americans being viewed by the Cuban public?
I don't think that the Cuban public sees the Americans any different way than it did before. I think what will, the anti-U.S. state propaganda, yes, was rampant everywhere, in the end, the Cuban people, have a close relationship with U.S. people, or want to have a close relationship or a closer relationship with U.S. people. So people to people is one thing. I don't think that that is drastically going to change. What, of course, is going to change is, hopefully, is the official rhetoric. Vis-a-vis the U.S. You already saw it with Raul Castro's initial speech on December 17th.
And do you believe that Cuba is now going to open up to the West, let's say like East Berlin did after the fall of the Berlin Wall?
It's already partly open to the West and has been so since at least the mid-'90s and certainly throughout the late '90s. Is it going to be like East Berlin as you slowly move towards, a marketing economy, even if it's a socialist economy? Some things are going to have to give. Now, is it going to be education? Is it going to be, support of culture? Is it going to be, medical, the possibility of free medicine for everyone? I don't think that, in the case of Cuba, that Cubans are, willing to give those benefits up.
Yeah. Dr. Lillian Munzer, thank you so much for your insights, for all this interesting information. We will wait and see.
Thank you so much for having me.
And now, what else is going on in Cuba?
The United States said it urged Cuba to improve its human rights conditions as part of the historic talks between the two countries, which started last week. As both sides reported making progress towards restoring diplomatic relations, the Cubans were still annoyed with the U.S.'s pressure on the topic. Earlier this month, Cuba released 53 political prisoners it had agreed to free as part of the deal to normalize relations with the United States. The move was considered an important step which positively kicked off the beginning of diplomatic talks between the U.S. and the communist-ruled island in Havana. Washington said it could push for the release of more Cuban political prisoners in the future. A Russian intelligence ship docked in Havana on the eve of the diplomatic talks between Cuba and the United States last week. Its arrival had not been previously announced by either the Cuban or the Russian government. The timing of the arrival couldn't be more suspicious. Many think it was orchestrated as a gesture from Russian President Vladimir Putin to remind President Obama of Russia's investments in the island. Although Cuba is expecting to see an influx of American tourists thanks to the lift of the U.S. travel ban on the island, other Caribbean travel destinations should not fear the competition just yet. Travel agencies say the tourism infrastructures in Cuba are almost non-existent compared to other Caribbean countries and will take time to develop. Hollywood, too, is interested in Cuba. With the normalization of the relationship with the U.S., the island may very well join its neighbors as a popular destination for Hollywood film productions. Shooting films in Cuba does involve some serious advantages for producers, such as historic locations, classic American cars, and good weather.
The Havana Biennial Art Exhibition takes place in Havana, Cuba, every 2 years. It aims to promote Third World contemporary art. This tradition, since 1984, is considered as an important forum for underrepresented non-Western voices. Joining us is Laura Salas Redondo, who organizes this year's Havana Biennial planned for the summer. She's a Cuban art historian who now lives in Paris. Hi, so who are the artists who are going to be represented this year?
Actually, there are around 120 artists that are invited this new edition of the Biennial of Havana. So we have a lot of artists from Latin America, the Caribbean, but also from Africa, Asia, and Europe as well. So it's really important for the cultural scene from Latin America, because it's after Sao Paulo, it was the oldest biennial from the Latin America. So it's really important for the contemporary art in the Caribbean as well.
But why is it actually important to give the spotlight to such non-Western art? Doesn't art have no boundaries, non-geopolitical definitions?
Actually, this is an important moment, because the artists find a kind of freedom to express themselves. So even for the Cuban and not Cuban, it's a particular place anyway, because the history of Cuba is really special anyway. So I think it's a moment to express themselves and to propose things that normally maybe in another place that doesn't have the same meaning. So I think that's important in Cuba.
And how important is it for Havana to be this venue for such art exhibition?
Every 3 years we have this huge event all over the city. There's a lot of people that came to Cuba for that. And this year is going to be really special, because we have all these changes that they're going through now in Cuba. So I think it's going to be really, really strong.
Nice.
And the city changed everything. Everybody's like involved in the culture, and it's really a really strong moment for the person that loves art and culture.
Now tell us about some of your favorite Cuban artists or Cuban pieces of art.
We have really important artists like Carlos Garaycoa or Wilfredo Prieto. They are young, but there are international artists, actually. All los carpinteros, they are a group of artists that are really well known outside of Cuba. But we have even this young artist that anyone knows, and it's really good. It's Jose Yaque.
Thank you so much, and we wish you good luck.
Oh, no, thank you.
Before we move on, it is important to say that we're not here today to encourage smoking. However, one cannot speak of Cuba without mentioning the best-known Cuban export, right? Cigars. The American author Mark Twain once said, "Eating and sleeping are the only activities that should be allowed to interrupt a man's enjoyment of his cigar." Now, we're about to interrupt Mr. Shmulik Tal, a cigar expert who publishes the magazine Cigar Flavored here in Israel. Hello, Mr. Tal. Good evening. So the Americans have gone without the Cuban cigars for years. Now that the American embargo is about to be lifted, do you think there is still a place for Cuban cigars in the U.S. market?
Cigars are desirable, and the most desirable of all are Cuban cigars. Cubans imply quality. For years, Americans have been exposed to cigars from the rest of the world, the Dominican Republic, Nicaragua, and Honduras. They produce high-quality cigars, but Americans have always coveted and have always wanted the Cuban. If you watch the Seinfeld episodes on cigars, you see how desirable they are. And now, Americans can finally enjoy their Cubans again.
So why Cuban cigars are considered the best in the world?
Cuban cigars are considered the best in the world because of the terroir. First of all, it is the basis for each crop, even for wine, and is also very specific to the cigar world. Terroir means the combination of land, investors, and temperature conditions, which enable the production of fine tobacco leaves. The cigars are produced only in a particular area in Cuba called Pinar del Rio de Baco, where the world's best tobacco is grown. There are also, of course, the secrets of the Cuban cigar companies who create a good blend. This is why Cuban cigars are the most desirable.
You know, smoking a cigar is often viewed as an act symbolizing a certain status. What do you think about this stereotype?
Cigars and pleasure are mixed together. This cigar is a state of mind and an experience you want to enjoy. This product is not available to everyone, so it's a little bit expensive. The price of a quality cigar can start at around $4 and go up. Cigars are a matter of awareness. You have to have an affection for them, be with good friends, and you have to want the cigar experience.
Shmulik, thank you so much. Go ahead and smoke one for us. David Daniel is a 30-year-old Cuban native who immigrated to Israel 2 years ago from Havana. He became famous around here after appearing on the popular show The Voice Israel, where he exposed his musical talent along with his interesting life story. And he's here with us today in our studio. Hello, thank you for coming here.
Thank you for inviting me.
So you are a musician who decided to immigrate to Israel from Latin America, which is supposed to be a fertile ground for musicians. Can you maybe explain this?
First of all, I lived almost all my life in Cuba, in a system completely different than the other countries outside. I just wanted to live in the music life that is very difficult in Cuba because of the system. The system gives us good things also, but there is a lot of limit.
Can you maybe tell us what was it like for a young adult to live under a communist regime, these limitations that you were referring to before? How did this affect your daily life?
It's a little difficult to me to explain this.
We understand, it's fine.
Yeah, but it's polemic. In Cuba, there is internet restricted. There is not the access to the open communication with the outside. For example, Cuban families living in United States cannot talk like face by face, like Skype.
Well, David, we're very lucky to have you here in Israel with us, not in Cuba, because you can perform in our studio today. And I know you have a song for us. What are you going to sing?
Well, the song I'm going to sing is named Y no fue un sueño.
What does it mean?
No fue un sueño. It was not a dream.
David, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Now,
Thanks to you for inviting me.
Go get ready for your performance. And while he's doing that, I want to remind our viewers that next week we'll have another focus. Just enjoy the rest of the night and the song.
La mañana llegó con la luz de tus ojos, con el canto de un ave que vio tu silueta, dibujando en mi rostro el color del amor con tu presencia, y no fue un sueño. La alegría regresa a mi vida de tu mano, a tu lado me espera una paz que ya había olvidado, devolviste a mi alma el calor que añoraba.